Tallboys and Trackmasters is brought to you by Expert Exhaust. Expect more for your money. MTB Shock Dock, your choice for suspension needs. High Gear Success. From helping racers get sponsored to motorsports event operation and promotion, shift your passion into high gear.
Track 93, the place to get ready to race.
And by IADV. From routes, guided tours, and more, we'll help you get lost.
Yeah, for some reason, when I see a log, my sphincter tightens, I start to tremble, I go all sweaty.
I'm a big fan of the 1.5 pork chop cans, personally.
You gotta make sure you get your protein and carbohydrates all in one shot.
Yep.
Nice looking bike.
That thing would look good with a hot fender too.
Yes, it would. Yeah.
Got the line.
Yes, it does.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back into episode 86 of Tall Boys.
Trackboys and Tallmasters. Wait.
Yeah, it's close enough. How you been, my friend?
Good. Been slowly making progress on this Trail 90 project. It's the deepest I've ever been into a motor. The only bridge further you could have taken it was to separate the crank and replace the big end bearing in it.
Oh, that's a tough job there.
Didn't have to do that. That was probably the one good good thing in that motor, but had to hone some rust out of the cylinder. Shallow helped me lap some valves, and we started up Sunday, ran it in, and it looks like it's going to be a good runner. So we're both really thrilled about that.
Yes, sir. Well, just remember, if you do have to separate that crankshaft, make sure it's on a dirt floor. You got your sandals on and the worst lighting that you could ever have, and it'll run forever. I'm sure you've seen lots of those videos.
I mean, sometimes I do think about I did have to do some Pakistani machine shop stuff. There is a passage for the crank breather on those bikes, and it's all cast into the cases, and your crank actually breathes out through, or crankcase breathes out through right where the sprocket is.
Yeah.
Well, somebody, Farmer John, whoever, grabs a hold of the biggest, gnarliest flathead screwdriver and a 5-pound mini sledge and just starts going at it to separate cases. Well, they broke a piece off of that mating surface for that air vent. So I took a brass barb for like a hose reel and machined it down. And when I say machined, I put it in a drill press and hand filed it until it fit. And then found center on that air passage, drilled it out just a little bit bigger, and put it in there, put some JB weld on it, and then decked everything flat with some 400 grit sandpaper on a piece of pane glass. So it's Pakistani machine shop.
Yes, sir.
But it worked really well.
I always love watching those videos, and especially stuff that you see like locally, like guy will have a small block Chevrolet head that he's dragging behind on his concrete driveway behind his Honda Foreman 4-wheeler. And you know that engine is either going to run for the next 100 years or it's not going to last 5 minutes. There's no in between.
Yeah. This is reading through the manual. It's talking about, piston cylinder clearance, this, that, and the other. It's like, yeah, I know that stuff's important, but we're already this deep in it. Why would I want to know if it's right or not? If it's so wrong that it doesn't run at all, or it runs and smokes or whatever, that it's going to go to a machine shop.
Yeah.
But
like
those are getting to be really few and far between, because that was my first thought, was to try to take that head and cylinder to a machine shop and have them cleaned up. No,
Yeah.
not quite happening.
Yeah. The mom and pop shops are few and far between, like you said.
Yep, it's unfortunate. What's new with you down in Flood City?
Oh yeah. Luckily that hit a little bit east of us, and I live on a hill, so it wasn't as bad. But yeah, we got absolutely hammered with rain here earlier in the week, and thoughts and prayers out with those affected. I know Wheeling got hit really bad too up in the northern Panhandle, and they're dealing with a lot of stuff there as well. Kind of thinking back, it's exact opposite of what the summer was last year, man. Just absolute, drought conditions, the driest we've ever seen. And now it's been one of the wettest summers. And unfortunately, you're well aware that the flooding in West Virginia can get really bad just because of the elevation changes and the lack of drainage that we have in this area.
It caught us camping somewhere around this time last year, I think. So like the one good big rainstorm that we had in summer, we were out in it.
Yeah.
So, but it's very unfortunate for all those involved with the floods. I know that Buge's Cycle Mart, which is an absolute staple of the Fairmont area, unfortunately, didn't make it out unscathed.
Yeah, and our buddy Richard Crosby's shop across town. Richard's the guy that with 304 Media that's been doing a lot of stuff with the club. His shop got hit as well and was pretty well underwater. So I would implore you, if you're in the area, to check on your friends, make sure everybody's good to go, and lend a hand if need be. And definitely donate to any donation centers in the area for those supplies that can help out. But unfortunate, but we consider ourselves lucky here. All right, well, shifting gears to the topic of tonight's episode, 86, Moto Movie Mania. Now, anytime your particular sport, hobby, or interest is portrayed on the big screen, it can be a good and bad thing. I know for us and a lot of guys in the industry, you start really nitpicking the film to a certain point to where maybe it's not even enjoyable anymore just because of how much stuff they get wrong all the time, it seems like.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of times it completely kills any immersion I had in a movie. And, being somebody that's into the hobby of, dirt bikes, etc., firearms, that's really bad. You can never watch an action movie. Well, there's a select few action movies and franchises that do it well. Anybody who has any concept of physics, period, any action movie is gonna send up alarm bells in your mind, stuff like that. But man, it's like every time I see a bike on screen, they get something wrong.
Yeah.
And normally it's not a little something either.
Yeah, it's major issues. I get that at the end of the day, films only have a certain amount of budget, and there's things that they tend to overlook and oversight on. But I mean, there's some very simple changes I think that the movie industry could make to make films better for motorcycle people such as ourselves. So let's talk about some of the bad stuff, and then we'll get to some of the good stuff. But I know probably my biggest pet peeve when it comes to any type of motorcycle in, big time Hollywood media is 2-stroke versus 4-stroke and not getting that right. Dude, that just drives me absolutely insane.
It's probably the single most common mistake that I see made. But I didn't even, like, before I got back into riding anything like that, I knew the difference in sound between 2-stroke and 4-stroke.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe these people who are otherwise, experts in sound engineering. You go through all the trouble to make like the Foley and stuff like that for explosions and car crashes and this, that, and the other. You screw up something that's probably the most basic thing you could learn in like a 15-second YouTube video, if that.
Yeah. The consistency is the worst part for me. I don't know how many times I've seen films where, you have obviously some kind of 2-stroke. You see the giant expansion chamber on it, and it sounds like an XR 100. Yep. And then you'll watch another movie a couple weeks later, and it's the exact opposite. You've got a giant expansion chamber on this RMX 250, what have you, and it sounds like an old XR600. Like, and even in that instance, I've seen times where, you know, the bike size is completely wrong. Like, how many times have you seen where the guys obviously say he's riding like a KLR 650 and the thing sounds like a DS80 two-stroke? Like, even that is inconsistent and not right most of the time in a movie. Like I said, just drives me bonkers, man. And like you said, when you're that immersed in that, it just makes the movie not enjoyable the rest of the time you're watching it.
There is, and we will talk about the movie. I won't give the title away. Well, franchise, actually, it's done an extremely good job of sound engineering and overall like mechanics and everything like that for dirt bikes and motorcycles. They are out there, but there's so many examples where it's just, you know, it's just not good at all. I remember watching some classic British trials film from, I don't know, probably the 60s, and they were all like Triumph Tiger Cubs and stuff like that. All two-stroke, overdone. All of it. Completely killed it for me.
Yeah. And, you know, I may understand a little bit that, you know, maybe that two-stroke pinging sound, maybe that adds to the drama and the action a little bit. But, you know, at the end of the day, let's try to get our P's and Q's situated and get this thing correct.
That, you know, the Fast and Furious shifting.
Oh yeah, that,
so we got
that whole
DRZ
franchise
400.
has problems.
We got DRZ 400s with a 5-speed gearbox, and these movie bikes have like 22 forward gears.
Let's talk about that. That's going to be my next big pet peeve, is the thought that these motorcycles have, you know, unlimited up and down gears. And while we're on that subject, probably the worst offender on this entire list, which the last two things we've talked about, they've broken the law on that. Terminator 2, when John Connor's riding the XR 100 away from the T2 Terminator, it sounds like a 125 two-stroke, and I think he shifts, if I remember right, I saw a thing about it, it was like 39 or 40 times he shifts up on this bike. Like, completely wrong. Just drives me nuts.
The bike with the most gears I have is an 8-speed, and that's Trail 90.
Yeah.
You get 4 high gears, 4 low gears.
Yeah.
Man, they just get so much stuff wrong about bikes, and it couldn't cost that much money to recruit, you know, somebody from the local motocross track.
Yeah.
In exchange for a case of beer, it's like, you know, what's wrong here, or how can we make this better? But I mean, the average viewer simply doesn't care, because the average viewer has not even a surface level understanding of motorcycles. Like, you'll see guys huck a bike off a 50-foot drop to flat, right? Yeah. I'm pretty sure everybody that's ever tried that in real life was either dead or wish they were when they woke up.
Yeah, or they ended up on had to lay her down, right?
Yep. Or bikes that, you know, have horrific suspension, like the XT250. Getting, you know, made to look like they perform a little bit better than they really do.
Yeah, and that can be a good and bad thing. Like you said, there, just physics in general. Like maybe during the plot line, there's a guy chasing somebody, and the dude's never ridden a motorcycle in his life, but now he puts the helmet on and he's, you know, Polteros out there, hopping cars, hopping curbs, getting away from the police or the bad guys. You know, you never do see that, where the guy gets on it and then he whiskey throttles into the side of a building or something of that sort. You know, so, maybe if it was a comedy, we might see that, but
yeah,
you definitely don't see that in action films.
There's so little understanding, and I get it. It's a movie. It needs to be theatrical. It needs to be exciting. Indiana Jones takes a flagpole and, you know, slams it through the spokes on the front of a bike, and that thing immediately just goes like end over end. That's not not necessarily realistic, especially if it's on gravel, because the front end's just going to wash out. You're going to either low side or high side. You're not going to flip into end over end. There's not going to be an explosion.
Yeah.
Probably.
I can't remember what film it was I was watching, but two guys like jumped side by side, and the main character's bike was messing up and like blew up in midair. So he just turns around and like shoots the other guy off the bike, and then jumps off his bike onto the other one and keeps going like nothing was wrong. And like, even in the first scene, you can see like the stunt rider is way too nose heavy. Like the bike would have just done an endo, but all of a sudden now it's landing perfectly fine. Like, I get it. Like you said, it's a movie. It's there for entertainment, but there could definitely be a little bit more consistency.
Something else too is you'll have like a chase or something like that. Somebody's on a dirt bike and they're on pavement, and they're making it look like they're stopping and cornering like they're on a street bike. Something a lot of people don't realize is that most cars actually can stop in shorter distances than bikes, especially if you're on knobbies. If you think about running a knobby or something like that, you might have like 2 knobs front and 2 knobs rear in actual contact with the pavement at a given time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've been known to lean a Trackmaster over on the pavement, mind you, but it's definitely not like a sticky track tire on a super bike.
Yeah. Now, on the same hand, obviously there are some fantastic motorcycle movies out there, and like not even ones that maybe it's, a Hollywood action film or something, but I would say that the motorcycle community in itself has been very well represented by people who took the initiative to showcase that. And, one that definitely comes to mind, and I think pretty much anybody in the hobby has seen, is On Any Given Sunday. That was really America's kind of first foray and look into off-road motorcycle racing and riding, Malcolm Smith and Steve McQueen and the like. So there are some very, very good examples out there. And I think it's a great way and a great media forum to showcase somebody what that world looks like, and maybe encourages them to get off their butt and out of the house and onto a bike.
So especially for kids, like, it's inspirational, or it was, like, for me at least to some extent, to see, dirt bikes especially. It was counterculture. It was like a sense of adventure and all that stuff. Like you said, there is a good job for representation, and I'm sure that that's led to people having an interest in it and eventually getting into the hobby as a result of it.
Yep. Some others I can think of kind of off the top of my head, Dust to Glory was a really good look at the Baja rally scene.
Yep.
One of my childhood favorite movies, and I know one of my sisters and one of my daughter Sophia's favorite movie, Motocross, the Disney Channel movie.
Shallow's in there shaking her head.
Oh yeah, that was a total like get the girl out there to ride type of thing, man. It's and it's a really, like, you want to talk about a detail like we talked about, true to the bike, like they did their homework about it. That's one of the best films out there, in my opinion.
Cool.
When they hire the French guy, I can't remember his name, to start racing for him at the end of the season, and he blows the 125 up in the air. Take it from the guy who's blown several of them up. That's exactly what it sounds like when it locks up in midair.
James, I can't imagine with your gentle and conservative riding style that you would ever have that happen to you.
Yeah, and I always did like a lot of the scenes you would see, like the girl Andrea, I think was her name on the movie, like just blitzing down this rhythm section on that RM125. You could tell it's Travis Pastrana with a ponytail. Like, it was. And they gave him their props and stuff at the end of the film, but
Mr. 125.
Yeah. So, like I said, there are some great examples out there, and I would implore anybody that's watching the show right now, put down in the comments what your guys' favorite, either motorcycle specific movie or maybe some other type of movie where there's a motorcycle in the focus of the show.
Most commonly, the stuff that we complain about, it's only present in like mainstream action films and stuff like that, where there is no intent for the motorcycle to be anything but a plot device.
Yeah.
Whereas like the movie you're talking about, several I've seen, especially a lot of like I was talking about, that vintage British trial film or whatever is one exception where they just overdubbed everything with 2 strokes. But for movies where the bike is central to the plot, they do a lot better job.
Yeah.
Which, should come as no surprise.
Yeah.
But,
I was trying to find this before we went live, and if someone would send it to me, I'll continue to try to look. I think it was about a year ago. I remember sitting on the couch with my twin boys, and they're 4 at this time, and it was some little kids show, and it was about a town, and everyone in the town were motorcycles, and they were just riding around like solving mysteries and what have you. This little tiny kids animated show, which you could tell did not have that great of a budget, every single one of the motorcycle sounds were correct, and I was laughing the entire time. I'm like, this 15-minute cartoon has more correct about motorcycle geometry and sound than most Hollywood movies I've ever seen.
It's so probably produced by some dude that had a lot of involvement in the hobby.
Yeah, you could definitely tell that was the case. All right, so let's get into some of our favorite motorcycle movies, and maybe the entire movie is not based on the motorcycle, but the scene might be there, and it's something that's really cool. These are not in any particular order of best to worst or anything like that. We'll go through them first.
I've received a message from my number one sponsor. Shiloh says Ricky Zoom is the name of that kid's show.
That's it. Ricky Zoom. That is it. Thank you, Shiloh. Yeah. If you guys have kids and you want to go check that out, let them watch it. It's awesome. Like I said, it's like I was just blown away that they got all the sounds right. Thank you, Shiloh. All right. First up, and like I said, again, this isn't, our list worst to best, but this is just what we've got together. We'd be remiss to not talk about Rambo First Blood and the venerable Yamaha XT250. I remember as a kid, probably way too young to be watching Rambo, but just seeing him escape the town, escape all the cops, get up into the woods and start his, rampage, if you will, against the authorities was such a cool thing to see, and really piqued my interest in motorcycles. And like you were saying earlier, Trevor, with the counterculture type of mentality, this speaks to that perfectly. Any thoughts on that?
It was definitely, it's definitely one of the top 5 most iconic, scenes with bikes.
Yeah, especially like chase scene.
Yeah, exactly. And it really fits with the overall theme of, getting out, getting away. That's a whole dual sport mantra, is to get out, get away from people. Well, people you don't want to be around. But
people are treating you badly.
Yeah. I was a little bit later in life when I saw that movie, and it still made me feel something about, like, man, that just looks badass. Like,
yeah. Yeah, and they were pretty true for the time, the sounds, and I think there may have been some burbles where it sounded like it was a 3-stroke here and there, but for the most part, the directors did a good job with it, and I'd say they kind of over embellished the skills that you could have on one of those old XTs.
Yeah,
John Rambo is a soldier of fortune, so he's got some skills, obviously, but
it's not that the bike couldn't do it. It's that you probably wouldn't want to do it repeatedly with the bike. Any among us that have ridden anything with more rudimentary suspension, you develop a different approach to riding, as out of necessity.
Yeah,
that, and an air-cooled 250 from that period of time, that's not exactly the powerhouse.
Yeah, you're
not
right.
That they're bad bikes, but
we've talked about it in a previous episode. One of the first like true street and trail dual sports. So it was really cool to see that. And for that time, it was basically a brand new motorcycle there in the 70s. So cool seeing that.
I'd say that sold a lot of XTs.
Yeah, it definitely did. Yeah, and that's that's another good point.
Top Gun for Yamaha sales.
Yeah, exactly, dude. That's another good point we could have mentioned on the positive side. It's free marketing for a lot of these motorcycle companies. And especially that case, you see the protagonist and the hero or what have you being an absolute badass on that bike. I mean, it's consumerism. You're going to want to feel that way too and buy that thing. Yeah. And I would say for a lot of the motorcycles on this list, a lot of them got sold just because of the movie that they were in.
Yeah, the ability to sell an image, attached to some kind of product for the human mind's extremely powerful. Jeep built an entire brand off of selling the image of taking the top off and, going out and exploring. So
Yeah. Yep, you're right, man. One other thing that I always will take away from Rambo, and I always laugh at myself, is kind of an inside joke with my family, but the scene where I think he finally crashes the bike and he's like on foot running away, and he comes up upon like an old mining camp and it's pouring the rain down. And he's trying to get something to cover himself up with, and he rips this old canvas tarp and just takes the giant Bowie knife and stabs some holes in it, and he puts it over himself and ties it on his waist.
Yeah.
And my dad affectionately called that the assault poncho. So anytime I've ever seen anybody like wearing a poncho or something out, I always remember that. Like that's Rambo's assault poncho. Always got a kick out of that. I think this list would be pretty well invalid if we didn't also talk about one of the greatest motorcycle chase scenes to ever be in cinema. And that is, of course, Steve McQueen in The Great Escape. Go ahead.
I said earlier that, Rambo is in the top 5 most iconic presentations of, dirt bikes, motorcycles, etc. in cinema. This, for me, is probably number 1.
I would agree too.
Because at the period of time that they did this, it was like unbelievable.
Yeah, you're talking 60s, and
you think about hucking something like that to flat, and like actually having to do it repeatedly to get the shot and everything.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, did Steve McQueen do his own stunts for this?
He did his own stunts, but the insurance company that was on the film refused to let him do the actual fence jump. And it was actually a friend of his, and the guy was a famous British racer. I cannot remember his name right now, and it's killing me. But Steve didn't actually do the jump. But I don't know if you remember whenever we got to go and hang out with Tom McKee and see the film about Steve. Basically, the only way he would agree to do this film was if this motorcycle chase scene was in the film. Like, it wasn't even part of the script originally. Yep. And I know, like, whenever he first added what he wanted in there, it was going to make the movie like 5 or 6 hours long. So I had to condense it down a lot. But it just goes to show you, like, how strong-willed of a person he was and what he wanted in this film. And this scene would not be in there if it weren't for him. And The Great Escape is a fantastic film, especially if you're a history buff like I am, and I'm sure a lot of you are out there. But this scene heightens that emotion of trying to get freedom at all costs. Yep. And again, probably my top motorcycle moment in a film. And like you said too, we're talking the 60s. There's no CGI. There's no fake stuff. Like, that was all done on location with real people, real machines. And that's something else that I always did appreciate about it.
However, that was not a period correct BMW.
You are right. It was not a German BMW war machine. That was a Triumph, TR6, I think it was.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
But they modified and painted to make it look like, to look the part.
We got a couple comments from Rob, and I appreciate you commenting here, Rob. I'll pull those up. Chips from the late 70s. Yeah, always had a lot of dirt bike action. Yep. Always. That was a great show. Time Rider. I do remember my dad talking about Time Rider. And he said Bud Atkins. That was his name. He did the jump. He was an American. Yep, Bud Atkins. That was right. So really, really cool stuff there. And again, like I said, Great Escape. You can't beat it. Let's get into some franchises, which are very well known for doing some motorcycle things. And one of the original hero adventure franchises, if you want to call it that, is, of course, James Bond. Here's Mr. Bond on his Triumph 900 in the latest installment of the Bond series, which I can't remember what the name of that one was. There's been so many of them, but this was another iconic movie. Had an awesome chase scene with the Triumph, and this helped Triumph sell some motorcycles as well They actually did a limited run of Bond-specific Triumph 900 scramblers. And I do believe that our good buddy Paul Edmondson was the one that was doing all the stunts for Daniel Craig on the Triumph during those scenes.
Nice.
So cool to see him get involved. And I believe that's also how Paul got his start with Triumph, because he's now their like team manager now for Johnny Walker and stuff.
It's
So
exciting.
it's kind of cool to see how those relationships build.
You talking about Bond reminded me of, there's been several iterations of motorcycle scenes through Mission Impossible over the years.
Yeah, Mission Impossible is another big one.
I've seen some footage of Tom Cruise doing his own stunts, including simulating, a wreck with no gear on.
Yeah.
he's actually purposefully wrecking a bike and going end over end with no helmet, no nothing.
Crazy.
That to me, I mean, I can appreciate, the lengths that Tom has gone through to do all his own stunts, but there comes a point where it's just too easy to sustain a life-altering injury.
Yeah.
Just not wearing a helmet. It's a lot easier than a lot of people like to think it is.
Yeah. That Bond film was called No Time to Die. It was the 25th Bond movie. They actually kind of switched back and forth during the scenes between a Scrambler 1200 and a Tiger 900. So you might, eagle-eyed viewers might be able to catch that.
Well, if we would have thought, we could have made memes. We could have done like the Bond, font and all that stuff with the Triumph logo, and said no time to release the Triumph 250.
Oh, that's awesome. I like it. And like I said, they did a limited release of 250 Bond edition replicas that had the same upgrades that the bikes were used in the film. So that was cool. Let me scroll through some other Bond films. Skyfall was another one of the Daniel Craig films, and you can see him riding a highly modified CRF 250L
with a front headlight off of a
looks like a KLR or something, or XR.
KLR.
Yeah, that's another thing. And I kind of understand from a licensing point where maybe they can't use the entire machine. Maybe that motorcycle company doesn't feel comfortable with them displaying the entire look of the bike. So you will see that in a lot of films. There'll be some mismatched parts to make it look like it's not what it actually is. And that's
a film that comes to mind. It's like that's Place Beyond the Pines.
Yeah.
That it's a mutt bike.
Yeah.
It's a couple of different pieces of bike.
Yeah. It started out as a DRZ 400, and you can see Ryan Gosling. It doesn't have the radiator shrouds on it. Trying to make it look like something it really isn't, but still mostly DRZ 400 there. Can't say that I've ever seen that film, but
dude loves cigarettes in that movie.
Ripping darts, buddy. Got to rip those darts.
Ripping darts, shifting gears, and passing people of alternative lifestyles.
Yeah. I've got a list here actually of all motorcycles that were ever used in the Bond films, and these go from newest to earliest. So in GoldenEye, he was on a Kavia 600 W16. Tomorrow Never Dies, he was on a BMW R1200. For Your Eyes Only, he was on a Yamaha XT 500. Live and Let Die was a Harley Davidson 350. The Spy Who Loved Me was a Kawasaki Z900 with some pretty good chase scenes in that one. And then in the earliest, one of the earliest Bond films that they actually used a motorcycle in was 1965's Thunderball. And Spectre agent Fiona Volpe was on a gold-plated BSA A65. So always lots of motorcycles in the Bond franchise. That's one you can always count on. So really cool there. You specifically mentioned it there with Mission Impossible and Tom Cruise kind of doing his own stunts and stuff. There's been lots of motorcycles shown in the Mission Impossible franchise. Let me pull some of these up here. Let's see. Yeah, Rogue Nation. He was on a BMW S1000RR during a high-speed chase. Mission Impossible Fallout. He was on a BMW R9T, which those are really cool motorcycles. Showed him kind of riding across Paris on it. Like Rob was saying, Chips, buddy cop movie, got lots of Kawasaki goodies in there.
Nice.
And yeah, really, really cool. One thing like you were,
that I just remembered.
What's that?
I have something to throw in that I just remembered.
Yeah.
Charlotte and I had seen it late at night, like several years ago. It was called The Dirt Bike Kid. It was really mid 80s.
Yeah, Ralphie from the Christmas Store.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And he gets, I think it's like an XR80 or something like that.
I think it was a YZ. It was a Yamaha.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
it's like all beat up and stuff.
Yeah, he brings it back to life by cleaning mud off of it and like putting, the Baja 2 bug eye headlights on it. But
yep.
He ends up fighting a bulldozer with the bike at some point in the film.
Yep.
So it's pretty interesting.
I can't remember the name of it, and I'm going to have to look this one up. But Dad showed me one from years ago where this guy was racing in the desert, and I don't know what happened, but he ends up going like through a wormhole portal, and he gets transported back into like the 1800s West, and he's on a motorcycle, and he's like fighting the bad guys in the old times on an old motorcycle.
I remember that movie, but I can't for the life of me think of the name of it.
Hang on, I'll look it up there.
Tell us a series of keywords you're typing into Google to try to get that.
Time Rider, The Adventure of Lyle Swan. Time Rider is a 1982 science fiction Western film which stars a cross-country dirt bike racer in the 1980s who's mistakenly sent back to 1877. It's worth a watch if you're bored on a Saturday.
Let's see something.
Yeah. Rob was saying, Time Rider. Yeah, I do. Yeah, he did mention that. Yeah, Time Rider is kind of corny, but kind of funny at the same time.
Well,
it's worth watching.
That's like the Dirt Bike Kids, the most non-serious, ridiculous film. I think at one point the bike lies.
Yeah, and what kind of freaked me out though is I remember watching that and like it shows him like wiping the mud off stuff and like the front fender's all crumpled and then you see it like uncrumple itself like it's coming to life. Like anytime I've ever watched a movie about some kind of inanimate machine coming back to life, it's kind of freaky. Christine, I was kind of getting those vibes a little bit.
I don't know about you, but the fenders on my bike stay erect. I don't have to.
No Cialis needed here, boys and girls. Let's see. Another good franchise that's always had a lot of good motorcycle stuff is Mad Max.
Yep.
It's usually, we're fans of the whole scrambler and converting street bikes into off-road stuff, and the hunt for what they call gasoline.
So, the whole point of Mad Max and the original Mad Max is, very much centered around biker gangs.
Yes.
And they actually, instead of sourcing bikes and having actors pose as a biker gang, they actually just, got a biker gang in Australia. They paid them in beer and maybe food, maybe a little bit of money. But the gang and most of the motorcyclists in the original Mad Max are true blue, grassroots riders.
Yeah, and you won't see that. You won't see that in these days.
But Mad Max, the whole thing, the vehicles themselves are characters.
Yeah,
Mad Max. Max's V8 Interceptor is it might be my favorite movie car. Even though the mag clutch on off supercharger or whatever is dubious.
Technology
or whatever. It's doable, but not within. Anyway, so the whole point is the vehicles are characters themselves in some sense. So it's made to be exciting. It's made to be hints of danger, this, that, the other. The modifications that they make to these bikes make absolutely no sense. The one you showed, you mean to tell me you've got a bike you're going to ride through the desert in sand and you're not going to have a front fender on it?
Yeah.
I would be cutting apart, freaking Rubbermaid garbage can, anything I could get a hold of to put a front fender on that bike, because otherwise you're going to be swimming in sand particles. And like, they cover some of the bikes in spikes and stuff like that. I'm like, man, these things are dangerous enough when you lay one down without it being a porcupine. But a lot of the stunts in Mad Max, especially Mad Max Fury Road, I had a huge amount of respect for, because in an age when they try to CGI, just about any and everything, green screen everything, the stunts in that one, the vehicle wrecks, etc., were genuine.
Yeah.
The scenes where they're jumping bikes up and over top of the war rig and all that stuff, they actually did it.
Yeah.
They had just a plethora of different bikes. Everything from, I think there's like a Honda Goldwing with sand skis on it. At one point I saw a trials bike, I think was covered in spikes.
Yeah.
It was really interesting.
And that, that's another point too, that, Hollywood in itself, especially when it comes to any kind of motorcycle film, that's employing some high quality people and riders as well. You can think about all those stunts, like, most of those are done by freestyle motocross guys. So that's another thing for them to hang their hat on is, maybe they're not, the top earning guys in that sport, but, Hollywood's always looking for stuntmen that can ride motorcycles fairly well. So, that's another avenue to showcase your talent, showcase your skills. And it's also another thing that I think about when I'm watching a film is, wow, that dude can definitely ride. Like, especially, you talk about Mad Max in the films you see where they're not using special effects. And, like for a movie, like, I don't know if you remember the first Triple X with Vin Diesel.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of motorcycle action stunts in that. The movie itself was just corny as hell, but
a lot
of times
I remember the scene, like they're like an exploding warehouse or something.
Yeah.
He's jumping over top of it. And
in
that universe, like shock waves from blasts don't exist. And
but I remember watching that the whole time. Lots of cool motorcycle stunts, and you're like, all right, I can see in the credits, it's like Jeff Emig and Brian Deegan and half the Metal Militia crew are in there, and they're getting the stunts down. So really cool to see that as well. And that's something I'm always thinking about in the back of my head while the film's going on. Let's go through a couple of more here. You see even now, the latest craze in film is superhero stuff. There's been several superheroes that utilize some cool motorcycles. We got Batman and the Bat Bike. This thing was, like you said, in a sense, its own character, just made Batman even more menacing and after the Joker on the Bat Bike. And, that some of these motorcycle movie specific bikes are works of art in themselves. Like, that was a fully functional thing. And it's really cool to see the build process sometimes. Like, if you watch the behind the scenes credits of some of that stuff, and give the guys that put these machines together a lot of credit too, seeing that.
That's in the same vein, if anybody out there likes Mad Max, anybody that's watching, there's there's a lot of documentary type content on the production of the vehicles, the design choices they made. For a lot of them, they made 2 or more vehicles that were going to get wrecked. They would make 2 identical copies, or at minimum visually identical. So that was something really cool to see. Somebody that's involved in engineering, I really like to see the behind the scenes of how they actually put the stuff together.
Yeah, for sure. A couple other superhero bikes I can think of. I mean, obviously you got Ghost Rider, with the flaming motorcycle.
That's the only time in my life I've seen a Harley look cool.
Well, you've got Captain America too. He's always trying to ride the Harley as well. So, superhero craze. You have superhero motorcycles as well. Something different and cool. Any other film genres or anything you can think of motorcycle wise? I mean, I'm happy to talk about like motorcycle specific films too as well. And their
Yeah, like
impact.
Desert Hounds with Destry Abbott.
Yep.
That's a
Time to Ride 2. Like the Time to Ride and Time to Ride 2, if you can find them. I have Time to Ride 2 that was the Crusty Demons of Dirt version of off-road racing. And it was something that I really cherished and enjoyed and wore that tape completely out.
That late 90s, early 2000s motocross era. I mean, it's kind of like the Attitude era
of wrestling. Yeah. Same attitude. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Metal Militia. Like it's gone. It sucks in a sense. It's like anytime I'll hear so and such racer got fined, he flipped off one of his opponents. I was like, cool. I wish they'd do it more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
you had alcohol and cigarette companies literally on the bikes and the riders' gear. I grew up in that era. That was my bread and butter, dude. It was the zip off LBZ pants, chugging the Sobe at the racetrack with the frosted tips,
Yeah.
That was me, son. That was me. And
I can hear the Limp Bizkit from here.
Yep. I can thank Crusty Demons of Dirt and all of the Fox Racing Terra Firmas from back in the day. That was where it's at, man. Then it's like as far as the off-road scene, like Time to Ride was really good. We talked about Dust to Glory.
On Any Sunday,
oh yeah,
for me it's like anytime where I hit a lull with the hobby or something like that, it's just consistent. I can go back and watch that, and it just elicits emotion and feelings towards it. And we went to see Tom, and had a chance to watch some snippets of that because it was a memoir of Steve McQueen and all that. That was pretty powerful.
Yeah, to this day, I would say that On Any Sunday is probably the greatest motorcycle specific film ever made. And I mean, at this point, pretty well anybody that's watching the show has probably watched that. But if you guys haven't, please go out and watch On Any Sunday.
No.
A lot of the old recap videos of the infamous Blackwater 100. Some of the stuff that those guys put together back in the day. Great stuff to watch and encapsulate what that early 90s off-road scene looked like. Recently you've had Ewan McGregor and Charlie's Long Way Around, Long Way Up series, which really showcased adventure riding. You can't tell me that millions of people watched that and didn't go to their BMW dealership and buy some GSs to take out.
I'll tell you, they're not necessarily films in the sense that, they're not coming out of Hollywood, but Rocky Mountain ATV-MC and Revzilla have both put together pretty good content regarding, what to me is the spirit of the hobby, which is, how far can we go on these clapped out bikes is what a lot of it boils down to.
Yeah, Rocky.
That's really
great,
in my opinion.
Yeah, and we've talked about that too in the past, man. With the popularity of YouTube now, there's so many fantastic content creators out there. We've had the privilege to interview several of them, but it's so easy nowadays to do that, to hop on YouTube, to see bike videos, trip recaps, races, bike reviews. Like that whole media in itself is fantastic.
In a sense, we need to thank our lucky stars for the existence of something like YouTube, because there's so much great content out there that never would have survived a sales pitch to a board at an entertainment company.
No
way.
The one exception might be Fortnite. I think they might have had a shot.
Yes. I haven't watched a Fortnite video in a while, actually.
Yeah, they're the
Revzilla. Fortnite.com is a Revzilla of Canada.
Yeah.
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
I can't remember which company did it. It was Revzilla or Rocky, one of the two. Whoever Airy was with at the time, they took a Honda CT 125 Super Cub, which is the new Trail 90, and a like 70s or earlier late 70s Trail 90 up to the tip of Alaska.
No.
And that's part of why I ended up owning now 2 of them. So
yeah, there's
it worked.
Trying to think of some others. Mad TV Motorcycle Adventure Dirt Bike out of Australia. Another great resource to watch for stuff. They've done a round the world trip on KTM 690s. Like, there's a lot of around the world stuff, and I definitely want to get somebody on the show that's done that trip and pick their brain a little bit. But yeah, it's, content creators. Thinking what Adam Ryman from overseas, A Riemann 1.
Yeah,
really good.
He's
stuff.
one of my favorite overall creators. His like adventure ride videos are extremely well made, but he's also great for mechanical and riding tips. He has a really no nonsense objective approach.
Yeah, and that's hard to do. That's hard to provide the entertainment and the information at the same time. But yeah, really cool stuff. And I don't see, the motorcycle industry lacking anytime soon for movie coverage. Might be some electric motorcycles coming out here before too long. You're going to start seeing in films, I would say.
Yeah. So that's something that as soon as you said that, I kind of thought about. So you brought up that there's there's a likelihood that 4 strokes are being overdubbed with 2 strokes because a 2-stroke sounds more aggressive, I guess. So what are they going to dub an electric bike with? I don't want to sit in a theater and watch something that sounds like my blender.
Maybe they'll just the sound engineers will have a mountain bike with a playing card on the spokes. Like, going
that would sound better, actually. No, we trash on electric bikes to some extent, and I'm not ready to embrace it fully. But an electric trials bike, I'd be interested in one.
Yeah. What's the is it the E Mustangs that have the speaker in the back that tries to make it sound like a V8 when you're in the car?
So also
like
the
that.
Dodge, the electric Dodge Charger or whatever was going to have something similar to that.
Yeah.
But that's something that car companies have done even with internal combustion engines is like a sports car comes out like a Dodge Viper, for instance. It's raw. It's unapologetically built for one thing and one thing only. And then they get a ton of customer complaints of like road noise.
No.
The lack of sound deadening, this, that, the other. So they go through the process, do sound deadening, do sound engineering, this, that, the other. And then you get complaints that, from the other half that you can't hear the motor. So what you end up with is they're pumping artificial engine sounds through the speakers in the interior.
Yeah.
So
I think
back in my day, we just either cut the exhaust off if you were rich and had $30. You put a Thrush glass pack on.
Oh yeah, let it get hot. Take it to the gas station and pressure wash up in there. Get the rest of the packing out of it. Oh yeah,
Sir.
Oh, yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. I think the big takeaway from this episode so far, Trevor, is we need to find out how to be a motorcycle sound engineer advisor on these films and make bukus of money.
Well, I'm
looking for a job.
Yeah, I'm open to creative forms of employment. So.
All right. Well, with that, let's get into some industry news. Well, first up is something that was kind of shocking, and it just came out here in the last couple of hours. Kevin Benitez is retiring from professional racing. A continuing list of nagging injuries have had the double Dakar champ to hang up his helmet and boots. He hopes to stay with KTM in an advisory role. We'll see how that goes, but kind of sad to see the career of a very, very awesome Dakar rally champion and fast guy kind of come to an early end.
I mean, it's tale as old as time. It says right there, continuing list of nagging injuries. It's the unfortunate reality for a lot of guys, especially in Dakar, which I would say is probably the single most grueling and dangerous motorsports event if you are a bike competitor.
I'd agree with that.
I mean, the chances of dying are always there on a bike, but on Dakar, it's, they're there in the form of a hard get off, bad crash, but they're also there in the form of a mechanical breakdown that leaves you, stranded or without water, what have you. I know Toby Price had, he was a Dakar competitor on the KTM team and suffered some pretty serious injuries at one point and came back from it. Skylar Howes at one point raced for Husqvarna in the Dakar Rally. I believe he had moved over to Honda in the last couple years.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at is all the names I'm familiar with are exiting the sphere of the Dakar Rally.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, but it is part of the sport. I mean, like you said, that level of fitness and a slightly nagging injury may be okay on different disciplines, but when you're going pinned wide open 120 miles an hour in terrain that's constantly trying to kill you every single second, you just can't have it. So it's sad to see.
I find it funny when motocross guys have opinions about Dakar in the sense it's it's not that dangerous. They're not even launching off, that big of jumps. It's like, well, some of them are, except they're sand dunes and there's no strict established route. There's no groomed track. It's one of the last few truly untamed motorsports events.
Yeah. One quick glance down at the rally road book to make sure you're going the right way. You hit a ravine that's 16 feet wide and you're done. It's extremely dangerous. Up next, we kind of announced this on the Facebook page there, but the Super Sherpa is back. Kawasaki has released it. Some of the main differences between it and the 230, which it's based on, are a slightly lower seat height, lower travel suspension, a skid plate, and bark busters. But for all intents and purposes, it's pretty similar to the current KLX 230.
Yep.
I do know the bodywork's a little different here and there, and I think maybe they're just trying to get away with bringing that name back in a sense, because I think at the end of the day, it's actually cheaper to just buy a 230S dual sport and put a skid plate and bark busters on it yourself.
Yeah, it's the older Super Sherpas were their own unique bike, and I always thought they were really cool. You had the low fender. Of course, they were still air cooled, which big props for Kawasaki for still producing a modern bike that's air cooled. I think there's always a spot in the market for air cooled single cylinders, just due to the ease of maintenance and the approachability of them. But to carry the Super Sherpa name, for it to just be a little bit lower and come with bark busters and a skid plate, or what Kawasaki calls a skid plate. Hopefully they've got plans for the future, but they were wanting to just bring the name back, for the time being.
Yeah, it doesn't really distinguish itself, and that's, you kind of get into that identity crisis a little bit with that. And I look at the current Honda Transalp 750 in that same vein. You're like, yeah, it's based on a Hornet 750, and it's slightly different, but who's it for? Well, who's the Super Sherpa for? That's what I think too.
Man, I remember all the hype surrounding that thing as it was, approaching time for launch and whatnot, and it really just fizzled out shortly after launch. And a lot of the reviewers that I watched, it was, asking the same questions: who is this actually for?
Yeah, most of the time the answer was, why didn't you just buy an Africa Twin?
Yeah.
So. But I see them out once in a while. They're probably the least popular middleweight adventure bike that I see out and about in my travels. And last and certainly not least, kind of exciting news here. I'm going to have to share my screen to get a look at this, but Royal Enfield, there is some rumors that they are bringing a twin cylinder Himalayan. An Instagram post seems to show early testing stages of a 650 or 750 Royal Enfield Hemi. The engine looks like it's based on their current 650 Bear Scrambler, which is a liquid-cooled machine. You can kind of see here, off-road suspension, kind of in that same category of a hardcore middleweight adventure bike. So I don't know if there's any closer. That's just more stuff on Royal Enfield's site. But yeah, looks like we have some early beta testing of a potential Royal Enfield middleweight adventure bike, which is exciting.
It's pretty exciting, and they're definitely making moves.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
You look at how far they went between the initial, Himalayan and the updated Himalayan. That was one of the first instances of a model update that was an actual, model update. It was practically an overhaul of the entire bike from front to back.
Exactly. And it's really encouraging to see a manufacturer listen to their customer base. Hey, what did you guys like about the old Himalayan, and what can we do to improve it? Everyone loved the old school, rugged kind of scrambler looks, but they wanted a better, more horsepower engine, better suspension, just better everything all around. And I really think in that aspect, Royal Enfield kind of knocked it out of the park with the latest Himalayan 450.
Yeah, I agree. Stylistically, that's one of the few modern bikes that I can say that I really like the looks of.
Yep. And so like you said, it's really encouraging and exciting to see where Royal Enfield goes in the future. All right, and that's going to bring us to our last and definitely not least segment, a little had to lay her down.
Did you run into some clippings? Did Barb take the kids? Well, Hoss, maybe you had to lay her down.
This week's Had to Lay Her Down is brought to us by Buttery Films. Make sure you guys check them out on their social medias. They always have some really awesome content. We're going to call this some WTF clippings and some young clippings.
Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that.
This is 11-year-old Lynx Lacey going full send.
Good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Just one little sigh and that hurt. That's crazy trying to send it on that gap for a little kid.
I mean,
goes to show you're never too old and never too young to have a little had to lay her down.
On one hand, somebody's got to be out there doing it. There's got to be the next Travis Pastrana. There's got to be, somebody. But
hey, maybe there's a Hollywood film company looking for a young kid stunt rider. He might have a future right there.
Dirt Bike Kid 2.
Electric Boogaloo, right?
Electric, yeah, hopefully not electric.
Might be. All right. Well, we appreciate everybody tuning in this evening. That's going to do it for us tonight. I know, Trevor, you're kind of maybe not sure exactly yet, but
yeah.
My plan is to go down to the Blackwater 100 reunion coming up on Monday at 1:00. I'm going to do some filming there. I do know that a lot of the legends are coming down for this. Scott Summers is coming, Tommy Norton, and that's just a tip of the iceberg of a lot of the old racers that are coming down there. I'm going to try to get a lot of footage of the old bikes and maybe get some interviews with some of the past competitors and champions. So looking forward to that, and hopefully we get some good content for you guys. So anything else, my friend?
I think that about covers it.
All right. Well, like we said, we appreciate everybody tuning in tonight for another episode of Tallboys
and Trackmasters. Thanks, everybody.
See you next time.